everyone, and welcome back to CountryCast. Today we are going to take a deep dive, a look back at arguably the most shocking moments ever in country music history. From murder, to arson, to rejection, to solidifying the outlaw culture, and to wild performances, and to even changing the tide of the country music genre entirely. As the old saying goes, they don't make them like they used to. And after hearing these stories, I think we can all agree to that. So sit back and grab you a cold one as we take this wild ride through legendary moments in the greatest musical genre there is. First up, we talk about setting fires, and I mean that literally. Now, two names that ring synonymous for setting fires is Charlie Rich and Jerry Lee Lewis. Charlie Rich had probably the most famous or infamous moment, depending on how you look at it, in country music history. Back at the 1975 CMA Awards, Countrypolitan Star and 1974 CMA Entertainer of the Year Award winner, Mr. Charlie Rich, was tasked with announcing the 1975 winner for the Entertainer of the Year Award. And as Rich made the announcement, he pulled off a stunt that no one could ever imagine taking place, especially during a ceremony such as the well-respected CMAs at the time. But he did. Charlie Rich opened the envelope, and just prior to announcing the winner, he removed a lighter from his pocket and lit the award card on fire, all while announcing the winner, which was John Denver. Here it is.
The winner. My friend, Mr. John Denver.
Now, throughout the years, many believed Rich's actions were a signal of protest against John Denver and his win. But during this era of country music, the genre was seeing an influx of artists who were crossing over between several genres. Hell, even Charlie Rich was actually a product of that as well. But it was believed that there was a resentment against John Denver actually winning the award. Now, on the other hand, however, according to an article from the History Channel, Charlie Rich may have just burned John Denver's winning award card just 'cause. By Rich's own admission, he was on a combination of prescription pain medications and gin and tonics that night. And his son has spoke publicly since that incident, stating, "He used bad judgment. He was human after all. I know the last thing my father would have wanted to do was set himself up as judge of another musician." So either way, as to why Rich did what he did, his decision to light the card on fire backfired, no pun intended, and he was banned from the CMA Awards for the rest of his career. And unfortunately, after 1980, his music career saw a significant decline, and well, John Denver's didn't. His career continued on as a major success. Now moving on to the other fire starter of an artist, Jerry Lee Lewis. Lewis pulled off a fiery stunt of his own, one of the performances that will probably live on forever, just as Charlie Rich's will. Back when Jerry was in his early 20s, when he was seeing a rapid rise in his popularity and success, he ended up playing the Alan Freed Package Tour in 1957. One of the nights on tour, the late great rock and roll star Chuck Berry was actually scheduled to headline this night. But Jerry, being the ambitious young star that he was, sure made a point to one-up Berry and prove his headlining worth. Jerry Lee Lewis closed out his performance by setting his piano on fire, by throwing a mixture of Coca-Cola and gasoline into the piano's internal workings and striking it with a match. While the piano burned, he finished out his hit song titled "A Whole Lot of Shakin' Going On." And well, he let the piano burn out. Needless to say, the shocking performance worked, and Chuck Berry even refused to headline due to Jerry Lee Lewis's actions stealing the show. Here is Jerry's legendary account of that night.
I just flipped it over the piano, and when I finished, a whole lot of shaking going on, and I just threw a match in it and it burned up.
Even though Jerry started out as the rock and roll star that he was eventually transitioned into country music. He has now been inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame this year as of 2022 and recognized for his success in the genre as what they describe as a veteran-era artist. Now, moving on to two other well-respected artists in country music, the Possum George Jones and Mr. Randy Travis. George Jones, who, in my opinion, had the greatest country music voice of all time. He had his fair share of battles with alcohol and ended up bearing the nickname No Show Jones because of it. But one incident in particular shocked the country music community. Back in 1982, George Jones was arrested for DUI while driving down Interstate I-65 just south outside of Nashville. Here's that moment.
But you're not going to do that. Wait a minute, Mr. Jones. Now listen to me. I didn't know he was back there. He just pulls up. Now, I ain't going to have you start no mess with him.
Well, you tell him to get away from me.
All right. He ain't got nothing to do with me.
I'll go to jail with you anywhere you're going to go.
All right. You're going to go with me, but you ain't going to mess with him, all right? Come on, now leave him alone.
What the hell?
I don't know, but I don't
What have I done?
You are drunk.
I am not.
Yes, you are.
No, sir.
I want to come up here and give you some tests. I want you to leave this man alone, okay?
No, you tell him to leave me alone.
Okay. He's going to leave you alone. We're going to go up there where he can't see us. Come on. You want to lock the car up?
No.
You don't want to lock it
No,
up?
we can run.
All right. Okay.
I haven't done nothing. I ain't got nothing.
What's that right there? George, hey, come on then, George. Wait a minute, David. Hold up. All right, kid, I don't want you straight up swing somebody.
It is hard to look back on that specific time during Jones's career. He himself even said that it was a moment that saved his life. Here he is with Ralph Emery.
But I'll tell you what, not sorry it happened because it probably saved my life.
George will forever be remembered as one of the greatest to ever do it in country music. Next up, we go to Randy Travis. Unfortunately, Randy Travis encountered law enforcement just as George did in 2012 and several times previous to this year. But it was a moment during his career that left country music fans simply heartbroken at this incident. In 2012, Randy Travis crashed his Pontiac Trans Am in Tioga, Texas. Randy was naked at the time of his arrest and was verbally combative with police. According to an article by Yahoo Entertainment at the time, Travis's blood alcohol content was twice the legal limit. After Randy's arrest, his representative released a statement regarding the incident saying, Randy's behavior was extremely altered the evening of his arrest due to the state of his mental health and substances in his body, causing him to do and say things that were entirely out of character. He suffered a severe concussion and sustained numerous other injuries from the crash. Notwithstanding the release of the tape, Randy and his team will have their day in court regarding the ongoing lawsuit against the state of Texas in relation to the violation of his civil rights. Randy Travis is well known to be a loving, caring person who is respectful of everyone. A video that shows anything otherwise only underscores that he was absolutely not himself. Randy is deeply apologetic for his actions that evening. A man of integrity with a good heart, Randy does not and will never condone these types of actions that distort the true beliefs of Randy Travis and his entire family. Now, in regards to the arrest tape that you see here, a judge ruled that the release of this arrest tape by Texas officials was not a violation of the singer's privacy. And Travis himself has even spoke publicly on his condition on that very night of his arrest in his book Forever and Ever, Amen, a memoir of music, faith, and braving the storms of life. Travis explained that on that particular night, he actually only had and consumed 2 glasses of wine. However, as an attempt to sleep earlier in the night, he took an Ambien, which set off a chain reaction mixed with the alcohol. Just 1 year after this incident in 2013, Randy Travis tragically suffered a major stroke and became wheelchair-bound and battles aphasia. But he has strongly persevered through his trials and tribulations throughout his life and throughout his career, and he continues to make appearances throughout his musical career with other modern-day acts in country music even right now. He was also inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2016 and performed Amazing Grace, which brought the audience to tears. There is no doubt that Randy Travis is one of the greatest country music artists of all time and deserves all of the recognition for his career 100 times over. One of the hardest incidents ever to watch as a country music fan. Next up, we reflect on a murder that changed the culture of the country music industry and hit so close to home for the genre and its fans. Back on November 10th, 1973, longtime Opry member and Hee Haw personality David Stringbean Aikman and his wife Estelle Aikman were murdered at their home, a small cabin out in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. On this particular night, Stringbean and his wife returned to their home after a regular scheduled performance down at the Grand Ole Opry. It was believed by authorities that when the Aikmans arrived back home, Stringbean noticed things to be out of place on the front porch of their cabin. As he approached the front porch of his home on foot, he was armed with a .22 caliber pistol that he was known to carry for protection. However, when he entered through the front door, two men, John Brown and Doug Brown, who were cousins, were lying in wait inside the residence and shot David Aikman to death. His wife Estelle attempted to escape the area, calling for help. However, the Browns caught up to her, shooting Estelle to death as well. Longtime friend and Country Music Hall of Famer Grandpa Jones arrived at the Aikmans' home the next morning to meet his longtime friend for a hunting trip, but instead located both Stringbean and his wife. Throughout the investigation, law enforcement explained the motive to be robbery, and both men were arrested for their murders. Following the Great Depression, banks were not necessarily always used, and the Aikmans' passing and circumstances surrounding their deaths changed business culture throughout country music industry in Nashville. Steve Gibson, who is a very well-known Nashville guitar player, and his father Kurt Gibson even played alongside Stringbean himself, spoke to the Tennessean about the culture change. He said, "It was a subculture where everyone dealt in handshakes, promises, and word of mouth with no fear of betrayal. The best qualities of any small town really define Nashville as Music City. And with the violent, brutal murders of Stringbean and Estelle, everyone had to rethink all that. We started looking over our shoulders and wondering what was happening." Now, all the way into the 2000s, this incident still resonated with the fellow country stars who knew the Aikmans, as one of the cousins, Doug Brown, passed away in prison in 2003, and the second suspect, John Brown, was actually released on parole in 2014 by the Tennessee Board of Parole at 64 years old. Like many of you, I myself grew up on Hee Haw and many of the regulars on the Opry, and Hee Haw played such a significant role in country music's foundation with the artists and acts that they had throughout its time. Stringbean and his wife will forever be in the hearts of country music fans. Speaking of changing tides in country music and sending the industry and genre into the future, how about we look at Hank Sr. and Patsy Cline? Their passings sent shockwaves through the business and to the fans, as they were pioneers for the genre, and their sound still remains influential to this day. Both Patsy Cline and Hank Sr. brought a sense of style with their voices that transcended many artists' vocal delivery through the years. Hank Sr. with his moan, honky-tonk, and yodel, and Patsy Cline with her deeply emotional crying approach. However, both passed well before they had ever really got started. Back on March 5th, 1963, Patsy Cline tragically passed away as her plane crashed down in a forest in Camden, Tennessee, due to inclement weather. Patsy was just 30 years old at the time of her death. Patsy Cline turned down a car ride back to Nashville and decided to get back by plane. Disregarding the advice from an airfield manager from Dyersburg Municipal Airport located in Tennessee, The pilot, Randy Hughes, insisted on taking off and attempted to fly anyways in the bad weather. Now, Camden, Tennessee is only 94 flight miles away from Nashville. One of the most revered artists at the time had unexpectedly lost her life just shy of getting home. Hank Sr. also passed away at the young age of 29 years old, a passing that has been surrounded by debate and of course was a huge loss for country music as he died at such a young age. Hank's official cause of death was ruled as heart failure. The circumstances surrounding his passing that have circulated heavily is that he passed while riding in the back seat of his 1952 Cadillac while riding to his next gig in Canton, Ohio. That was scheduled to take place on January 1st, 1953. Report archives have noted that Williams and his driver stopped off at the Andrew Johnson Hospital located in Knoxville, Tennessee, when his driver, who is Charles Carr, requested a doctor for Sr. The request was made claiming that Hank was having a reaction to chloral hydrate and an alcohol mixture. Hank Sr. was then injected with a shot of B12 that contained morphine. Now, the two continued on with their trip to Canton, Ohio, but it is believed that Carr's last conversation with Williams is when they stopped off at a restaurant in Bristol, Virginia. And by the time that the two had reached Oak Hill, West Virginia on their travels for gas, that is when Carr found Hank Sr. deceased in the back seat of his vehicle. According to the autopsy report, his cause of death was listed as insufficiency of the right ventricle of the heart. I could only imagine what all we would have heard from Hank Sr. had he lived on beyond his 20s. Let's switch gears for a moment and take a look back at Miss Loretta Lynn, a woman who not only put the country music industry on notice, but the entire country. It was with the release of her hit song titled The Pill. Lynn released the song in 1975, highlighting the availability of birth control. Now, the song was banned from several radio stations, but would later help initiate women speaking out regarding their body and reproduction choices. This kind of conversation was pretty much unheard of at the time. Even though that this song created much controversy at that time in the industry, it still peaked at number 5, even number 70 on Billboard's Hot 100, and number 1 in Canada, which also has a very large country fan base. Loretta Lynn has no problem telling you like it is, even to this day, and she has presented much of that in her music career, where she's created a legacy that will forever be stamped in country music. Very controversial song at the time, but again, it was a change of tide. Last but not least on our list is the man himself, Mr. Johnny Cash. Cash's moment came in 1965, when he kicked out the footlights while drunkenly performing at the Grand Ole Opry. Because of this, Cash was banned from performing at the Grand Ole Opry for a period of time, but of course was later reinstated. Just as Elvis's dance moves were considered wrong, Johnny's actions were just unheard of at this time with the more conservative country music fans. The 1960s had still not really flipped over into the outlaw movement, but we can pretty much thank Johnny and Willie for everything that we gathered from that era. Now, Johnny didn't let his band from the Opry hold him back. He told one of the most legendary stories later on. He said, "I don't know how bad they wanted me in the first place, but the night that I broke the lights on the stage with the microphone stand, they said they couldn't use me anymore. So I left and used that as an excuse to really get wild and wound up in the hospital with my third time. I broke my nose." Even though Johnny was country music, I don't think we can argue that he was still a straight rock star, and his sense of energy and his style has made him one of the most well-respected outlaws in not just country but the music business, even lyrically. There have been several moments within country music that have really been an opportunity for the music to either gain influence or have a different projection for the future, or something that changed the tide as we've discussed in this video. But I'm sure There are plenty more out there, and if you know of one and you would like to share it down below in the comments, please do. But that will be it for today's video. If you're new here to CountryCast, hit that subscribe button down below. Turn those notifications on as well so you never miss out on any breaking updates surrounding your favorite country artist and all the news coming right out of Music City. Y'all stay country.